again, everybody, and welcome to Tiger Sidelines on MC22 alongside Dave Matter of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch and Power Mizzou's Gabe DeArmond. I am merely Bo Bayman. Thanks, as always, for joining us. We'll talk about the best athletic program at the University of Missouri and the Tiger wrestling team in a little bit, but let's talk about the much-needed win last night and really maybe a season-defining win for Conzo Martin's team. They beat Florida 72-70, and Gabe, this cements them in the tournament and really puts an end to all the speculation and all the wondering of what's gone on in the past 5 games.
Yeah, I mean, I think they were probably in the tournament regardless, but last night made sure of it. Tuesday night, Wednesday night, whatever, days are all the days don't exist anymore, but and I think probably made it certain that they will be seeded to win a game. I've got a hard time seeing Missouri dropping below an 8 at this point in time. They have an elite resume as far as who they've beaten. I mean, it's crazy. They're like 6-2 against teams in the tournament. They just don't beat as many of the teams that aren't going to make the tournament. So would be good for Missouri if nobody from Mississippi manages to claw their way in.
Tigers are now 15-7 overall, 8-7 in the SEC. And Dave, we can break this down a number of ways, which we will, but I'm going to start this way. The one thing I noticed last night, which I hadn't seen in the past couple of weeks, I thought the defensive effort was much, much better last night against the Gators.
Yeah, and Florida had a ton of turnovers, and not all of them. You can't give Missouri credit for all of them because sometimes they were just stepping out of bounds or just doing some unforced things. But once Missouri got set in its half-court defense, they were hard to score on. They had a lot of deflections. They just seemed like they played with a lot of energy. You didn't see guys getting a lot of just wide open shots where there was some kind of breakdown. And they got back on defense pretty well. They weren't giving up a lot of transition points. They just looked like they were playing pretty well together on that end. And Missouri's not a team that blocks a bunch of shots or anything like that. But Drew Smith was really good getting steals, just being pretty feisty out there. They weren't calling a lot of fouls, and I think that helps Missouri sometimes because they like to be physical and agitate you a little bit, and they were doing that last night, and it really seemed to help. And that their offense just kind of fed off of that.
As I perused the stats, they had 1 block shot by Drew Smith, who was Mr. Everything. He had a great game, and Gabe, they dialed up that last play for him, and he went reverse and put it in with 0.7 to go. And Drew Smith was the reason they won that ball game.
No question. It took it at 3 Florida players by the time he got the shot off. And, he's fun to watch because you don't quite know how he manages to do that, right? He is not a guy that should be athletic enough, I think, to make that move against Florida. But he got baseline, went around his guy, beat another guy to the spot and went under the rim and laid it in. And I think a basket Missouri had to have, because if that game goes to overtime without Tillman after blowing an 8-point lead in the last 2:27, you don't love Missouri's chances. And it also shows how much one play changes the discussion after the game. I mean, nobody's talking about the fact it was 70-62 with 2:27 left because it doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's right. But let's talk about that. Mitchell Smith makes that 3. And then in the next 2 minutes and 15 seconds, let's say, really Tillman missed the layup and then didn't hustle back, got beat. That sort of changed everything, because I kind of thought once they were up 8, I thought, okay, they may have it here. They might need 2 more points. Well, it turns out they did need 2 more points, but not in the fashion they thought.
Yeah, they had a couple fouls there, and that put Florida at the line. And you can't play any defense when the other team's shooting free throws. So there's nothing you can do about that. They were fortunate to have some time there on the sideline to draw up a play and just kind of collect themselves. And Conzo made the point after the game. I mean, they were fine without Tillman there. I mean, not that he was playing poorly or anything like that, but it wasn't the end of the world that he fouled out. They used the big guys as decoys on that last play anyway. And Mitchell Smith and Kobe Brown both set some screens for Drew Smith, but they finished. And it's not always pretty. It can lead to some stress, I'm sure, if you're a fan watching. But this team is 6-1 in games decided by 5 points or less. And there's got to be something to be said for veteran players being able to do that, for Conzo to be able to manage it. You don't want to be put in those situations, but it's better to be 6-1 in those games than 1-6. So they find a way to get it done more often than not.
You guys both noted it last night. Konza was really ecstatic last night. I mean, he was really happy with that win.
Yeah, and I think Dave and I both have heard, he hears some of the things that are said. It's hard not to. And so I think he probably had a sense of what the fan base's pulse was about this team coming into that game. And I obviously he would never admit it, but I think for him, and I think both for Mark and Mitchell Smith, last night was a little bit of, hey, you want to hop back on this bandwagon? Like we got a little room because a bunch of you guys jumped off and buried us. And it's a long season. I was struck by, and I tried to get him to admit it, he wouldn't, but I was struck by just he was bouncing around. He could hardly sit still doing that interview, and then the contrast of you have Drew Smith come in next, and he's the guy that hit the game-winning shot, and Drew is like catatonic because that's how Drew is, right? He's just the most even keel guy ever. And you would have thought that he just like made a shot in the layup line.
I thought Konzo too was genuinely really happy because I think if you lose this game, I think there's a fear that whatever was working while they were playing well was broken, that this team was broken, that you just couldn't put it back together. And they did enough in this game and got back to their style to show him, hey, this team is fixable, and this was fixed, and now they're playing their best at the right time of year. That can be short-lived, obviously, but I think there was just a sense of relief too that, hey, this team is not what the fear was it was going to be in that Ole Miss game. It can be salvaged and get back to playing the way that it played when it beat Alabama, when it beat Illinois and Tennessee and Arkansas, and those were really good wins, and they seemed good at the time, and looking back now, and they really are still impressive wins.
I think it's interesting to point out too, they did have the weekend off. And I wonder if that was like a reset button, a little refresher going into they just changed the calendar to March and said, hey, here we go.
Yeah, I mean, that's the storyline now, right? Because they won. I mean, kind of like the players only meeting fixed everything going into the South Carolina game when really what was fixed was they played South Carolina. So definitely a good win. Like Dave said, you go into the NCAA tournament and whatever Missouri's draw is and wherever they're seated, they're going to look at this thing and go, yeah, if we play well, we can beat that team because they've beaten teams like that, right? Florida was big because that's the type of team and that's the type of game you're going to have to win. Saturday's the last one where it really doesn't matter that much if you lose. After that, your season's about to be over if you lose.
One guy we haven't talked about at all yet is North-South, Xavier Pinson, a guy who got going again against Florida, didn't have to have 36 points, but had some key shots and made some key shots and looked interested again, and that's what they're going to need.
Yeah, I didn't think he was TCU Pinson, where he's just attacking at will, but he did seem more engaged. He did a better job of had some urgency when he had the ball. He wasn't just kind of carelessly dribbling the ball around. There was better ball movement, and he hit some shots. I mean, you give him credit for hitting some big shots, and he didn't take bad shots. I didn't think there was a sense of any point where like, oh, no, why are you doing that? You just took all the momentum away. He didn't really turn the ball over. So was the message delivered to him? I don't know. It's always a kind of a game-by-game basis and test case with Pinson, but his body language was much better. If you saw him celebrating with teammates afterwards, that seemed genuine. So hopefully for their sake, they have him figured out and back on board because he definitely was checked out there for a while.
Yep. And they got Mitchell Smith. They got him going again. Kobe Brown didn't have the best night because he was in foul trouble. But now they play LSU. And as Gabe, you said, this is a game that I don't want to say doesn't matter, but it doesn't really matter.
Right.
And then you go to the SEC tournament. And I heard Gabe say this, and he said it all year long. You might want to get the heck out of Nashville as fast as possible. All you want to do there is stay healthy. And then you get to the NCAA. That's where we're at. We're at the postseason right now. And it just happens to be a game with LSU on Saturday.
Yeah, and that LSU game does, if Missouri wins that game, the path in Nashville gets significantly easier because if they win, regardless of what else happens, they're the 5 seed. And that means, the A&M Vandy winner, I'm assuming, in game 1, and then you play Tennessee probably in game 2. Could be Florida, depending on what happens with Tennessee and Florida on Saturday. Otherwise, you're looking at, a 7 or an 8 seed, which gives you Alabama or Arkansas if you even get to that second game. But like I said, to me, the only goal in that thing is just don't get COVID. Like, that's it. I mean, yeah, you'd like to win a couple games, and maybe because I think Missouri now is in a position to play itself back into a 5 seed. I guess if they won the whole thing, maybe a 4. But if I'm Konzo, I don't want to win that whole thing. I mean, and that's not just because of COVID. I've said I mean, we all remember Norm's teams. They would just sell out in that Big 8 tournament, and they would have nothing left. I mean, that's why I think Norm's teams didn't play well, because in the NCAA tournament, a lot of times they put so much into winning the regular season title and then so much into those 3 days in Kansas City that, like, it was just hard to get back up and do it again 5 days later. So if I'm Konzo Martin, I think the ideal thing is go beat the bad team you play on Thursday, look good, but it's all right if you lose in the quarterfinals and get to come back home.
And we should mention as well, this Saturday, the LSU game, it's a good one to win and get a little momentum. It is also senior day. And so there will be some guys that play potentially for their final time at Mizzou Arena, Dave.
Yeah, and they're going to do that ceremony after the game, which is always, there's some danger there, because if you lose, it's a buzzkill. No one's going to feel like celebrating anything at that point. And, there's not going to be the usual, big crowd to go through that, but you got to do it somehow. And again, there's still some uncertainty on which of these guys will come back, if any will. I'm still not certain any of them will. But you got to do it. And, you just hope that for their sake that it's an enjoyable ceremony, because it will be an absolute bummer if you got to get out there and go through the motions after a loss.
So that game is at 2:00 on Saturday. Let's talk about the women's basketball team. Robin Pinchton's team lost to Tennessee in a game where they led, I believe, for 3 quarters and then lost it in the fourth quarter, 79-73, and then beat Mississippi State down at State by 20. Mizzou is 9-10 on the year, 5-9 in the SEC. They're the 10 seed in the SEC tournament. They haven't played as we tape this. According to Robin Pinchton, she thinks that they're a bubble team, but they're certainly on the outside looking in and would feel a heck of a lot better with a couple of wins. I believe that starts with Alabama. So they're still there. There's still something to play for Robin's teams.
I think they'd have to win 2 to have much of a chance. You got to beat Alabama, obviously, in the first one. And then I don't know what the seedings are, but you're going to get the number 2 seed in that second round. And that would be one that you could point to and say, look, we've been competitive with this level of team. We beat one. I don't know. You're still talking about like 11-11 at that point. I guess they could get in. It would be weird to me, but it could happen.
When the week began, they had the highest net ranking. I think they were right around 40. They were higher than the men's team. Highest net ranking of any team with a losing record. They were higher than about a dozen winning teams from the power conferences. So it goes to show like what I guess losing close to really good teams does for you. But still, it'd be a weird look to put them in with a losing record. So yeah, I'd agree with Robin. If it's just based on the net, then they're in, which is crazy to say. And then you just look back with some regret and think, which game, if they just would have won one game that they lost, one of those close ones, which one could it have been? And then maybe we're talking about a team that's not even on the bubble, but it's in the tournament.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And for them to be successful at the SEC tournament, they're going to have to keep shooting from the outside. They've been really dynamite from downtown of late.
That seems to be kind of Robin's teams. Honestly, when they're good, the outside shots are going in. There was obviously a difference when it was Sophie and the Porters, but the team's MO was really still the same. They shot a ton of threes. They turned the ball over way too much, but there was a lot of variance in performances.
Yeah, lots of ebbs and flows. We'll see what they do at the SEC tournament and see if they get a ticket punched by playing very, very well. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll check the Twitter feed. We're at Tiger Sidelines on Twitter. As we always say, you're watching Tiger Sidelines on MC22. back, everybody. This is Tiger Sidelines. Dave Matter, Gabe DeArmond, and I'm Bo Bayman. Thanks as always for joining us. And we will check the Twitter hashtag right now. And Steve comes in and says, when Mitchell Smith lined up that three with about 2 minutes to go at Florida, were all three of you going, no, 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 no? Oh, hey, by the way, great shot.
I wish Konzo didn't have a mask on, because I would love to know what he's thinking or what he's saying but you know what? Give the kid credit. And this is why they like playing for Konzo Martin, because he has never backed off that all year. Like he said, for us to be good, Mitch has to take that shot and he has to make it. And hey, it happened at the right time. I mean, I would think probably not the way you would draw it up and not the guy you would say, hey, we want him taking the shot, but he knocked it down.
And I thought it was a little bit different, him shooting it up 5. I mean, because it did put him up 8. It's not like it was a tie game, but still, I mean, give him credit. He knocked it down, Dave.
Yeah, and the one thing you just don't love about him shooting threes, other than the fact that I think he's a 27% shooter on the year, is that he's also a good rebounder. And when he's shooting that three, that takes him away from underneath the glass. And we know at that point, I can't remember if Tillman was on the floor on that possession or not, but he's got bodies all tangled up on him in that game. So you're at a disadvantage as far as getting the rebound. But to his credit, he made it. He is Missouri's best free throw shooter, which is kind of wild. He's only missed 4 free throws all year, shooting like 87%. So he has a good form. And we saw him make a bunch of threes last year. It's just he got in such a hole at the beginning of the year this year and had a couple bad games that looks like a really bad shot when we have seen him make them before.
Father Time wants to know, this is throwback. Why did Glenn Dandridge not reach his potential? He had all the tools, fairly sure he was the number one topic on the minds of Tiger fans. And he came in with a lot of hoopla, but
can we just talk for a minute? Like what's going through your head that you're sitting around thinking about Glenn Dandridge on a Tuesday in 2021?
That's a tremendous pull.
The reason he didn't work out is because like the ball never went in the basket when he shot it. If you talk to anybody around those teams, they would tell you, come to practice and watch this kid shoot. And it is ridiculous.
Yep.
But then like when the game started, it looked really good all the way until it got close to the basket. And then it just never went in.
And that was the thing. A lot of people saw him as the replacement for Matt Lawrence, and it just never materialized.
Well, he was actually before Matt Lawrence, I think. Because he came in with Marshall Brown and Jason Horton and all those guys.
Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah.
So, hey, while we're on this topic though, like Dave, why didn't Missouri use more guys to cover Hank Baskett against New Mexico that one day?
I think about it every day. I just me and Matt Eberflus, we wake up every morning.
Yes, you got to love Twitter. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the Diamond Sports Plus, another dominant showing from the Missouri wrestling team. We'll talk about it when we come back on Tiger Sidelines. Welcome back to Tiger Sidelines, everybody. Dave, Gabe, and Bo here, and the number 5 ranked Missouri wrestling team wins its 10th conference title in a row, its 9th MAC title in a row, in dominant fashion, scoring over 188 points. I believe they had 8 in the finals. They ended up with 4 champions, and they got all 10 through the NCAA into the NCAA tournament without having to do any wild cards or any qualifiers like that. So they are sitting pretty for the national tournament, and Brian Smith's team just continues to roll and be dominant.
Yeah, I'd be curious. Does he think, and Bo, you would be able to answer this, does he think this team is on par with the best teams he's had, or maybe is it a down year in the MAC, or how does he measure this? I mean, what do they have as good a shot as any team he's had to win it all?
I think so. He thinks that top to bottom, there are no holes in the lineup, which he likes. I mean, a couple of the guys that lost at the MAC got upset, like Alan Hart got turned on in his semifinal match, was down 6-0 and lost 8-6. I mean, he almost made it all the way back. I just think that top to bottom, their lineup is so good. And the thing that he likes, there's so many good wrestling programs in the Big Ten this year. Iowa's really good. Penn State, of course, is really good. Ohio State is good. But his team will be back all next year. I mean, he's totally expecting all these guys to come back, and they're going to have the same lineup and be that much better. But I think they can go, and especially with bonus points, I think they can do some damage, make some noise, and they should get on the podium at Nationals, especially considering, even though there's no fans, it's in St. Louis, so they'll have that home mat advantage for sure. Plus, the other thing that Brian told me that he likes is the MAC pushed up the conference tournament this year to make sure there were 2 weeks in between to make sure if somebody tested positive, they'd still be able to wrestle. So they've used this time now to get back in the room and watch film, and they're going to get healthy. They're going to be healthy as they go to the national tournament, and sometimes that isn't always the case.
And I know in the past, like Missouri's had that Askren, Jaden Cox, whatever, but they haven't had – there have been a couple of weight classes where you go, well, you're not scoring points here. And that's where you go from having a chance to compete for the thing to, fifth, sixth, wherever Missouri's been, which don't get me wrong, is good. But it'd be a great story. I think everybody who's followed Missouri at all, there'd be nobody more deserving to finally win a title than Brian Smith. And I don't know if this team has that ability or not. I mean, but there's obviously, hey, top 3, top 5, whatever would be great. But it'd be really cool to see Brian actually get to win one of these.
Yeah, no doubt. And they would love to have some national champs. And I would imagine that they have a couple of shots in a couple of spots. Hey, number 19 softball went 5-0 on the weekend. They beat Middle Tennessee State, South Alabama, Northwestern State, and SIUE. The Tigers kind of quietly, Dave, 12-2 already on the season.
They're just hitting a ton of home runs, getting really good pitching, it seems like. Haven't played, just by looking at the schedule. It's not the most rigorous competition yet, but can only play the teams on your schedule, and they've done a really good job. Larissa's really building something there, it appears.
And this weekend, they do step it up. I know they go to Oklahoma. They'll play Oklahoma twice, and they'll play a couple other teams. I think they have 5 games this weekend. Baseball started at home. They had nice weather, but not a nice result, and the pitching was really, really poor. They went 2-2 against Omaha. The Tigers are now 3-5 on the season. They head to Frisco College Baseball Classic from Thursday to Sunday, and it's not going to get easier this weekend for a team that really has struggled pitching.
Yeah, they play Dallas Baptist, which if you're not a college baseball fan, I think people will look and go, oh, cool, well, they'll win those games. No, that's a really, really good program. I think Steve Beazer's just got to get his team to SEC play where it'll get easier, right? I mean, yeah. SEC's not that great in baseball. If you can just fight your way through the non-con and then start to pick up some league wins.
Can they join the MAC? Maybe switch with the rest of
right. I think the disheartening thing is, they've been scoring runs. It's just they cannot get anybody out.
And this is the time of year where it's usually the opposite. I mean, usually at the beginning of the year, especially when it's 14 degrees at Taylor Stadium, which it is even when it's 62 at my house, you're usually seeing a lot of 3-2 and 2-0 and stuff like that, but not this year.
No, not this year at all. Even in the game that Spencer Miles pitched, he gave up no runs through, I think, 6, and Omaha ended up scoring 9 runs in that game in the final 3 innings against the bullpen. So it's been tough going.
It seems like they're trying to figure out roles in that bullpen. They're just throwing a ton of guys. I mean, Omaha scored 17 in one game. So it's been kind of a puzzle for him. And I don't think the pitching staff's not fully healthy either. They're missing some guys that they hope will, eat up a lot of innings.
Number 22 gymnastics team. They closed the regular season at number 3 LSU. And if I'm not mistaken, they had a huge win this past weekend, didn't they, Dave?
They did, and it escapes me exactly what happened, the details, but I know that it was huge. And they were missing one of their key gymnasts, and I did not do my show prep. She usually is in at least 3 of their events, and she was out. So they stepped up big time and did some really good things on the different apparati that they compete on.
We're going to throw out, they probably had a 196.5 725. That's what I'm going to say.
That's close. Might be a fraction off here or there.
We'll deduct a point for that. Number 25 volleyball splits with South Carolina. The Tigers are now 11-5 on the disjointed season as they continue to keep going. Finally, before we get out of here, the game is against LSU and senior day. It should be a special Saturday starting at 2:00 at Mizzou Arena. Just your final thoughts on what Saturday means, and really beyond that is next week, what that means as well, Dave.
I wish there could be a bigger crowd. I mean, I think these guys, these seniors, are all genuinely good guys that people like. I mean, you got Jeremiah Tillman, who's come a long way in 4 years. Mark Smith, Drew Smith, Mitchell Smith. I mean, Mitchell Smith has been at Mizzou, for about a decade now, it seems like, and Drew Buggs, just all really likable guys. And you're happy for them that they get to close out their careers most likely, in the NCAA tournament, where Tillman is the only one who's ever played. Illinois didn't make it Mark's freshman year, and Evansville didn't make it when Drew was there. So good bunch of guys. I wish there was a bigger crowd to see them. And I just hope that it's not one of those buzzkill ceremonies after a tough loss.
Yeah, no doubt. And quickly, Gabe, your thoughts on spring football? We didn't touch on that. What's been going on with Eli Drinkwitz so far?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to tell a whole lot based on what we see, right? But actually on Saturday, they are opening up practice to the public and to us. We're going to see more than we've seen at a practice in years, I would assume, although this may be the one where they go, hey, guys, we're not going to do any of the good stuff because all these people are here, right? But I'd be interested to know, and I haven't heard, I think Missouri would have an opportunity because football practice is like 10:30 to 1. I think they'd have an opportunity to put that broadcast maybe on the Jumbotron and get people to hang out and watch the basketball game at Faroe. It might be kind of cool. I don't know that they're going to do it, but I think that might be a little marketing opportunity there if anybody wants to hire me for my expertise.
I'm sure they will, no doubt about it. All right, that's going to wrap it up for this show. We want to thank Brian and Matt behind the scenes. For Gabe DeArmond and Dave Matter, I'm Bo Bayman. Thanks as always for watching Tiger Sidelines right here on MC22.